You know, when people come to me and say I'm stuck, they usually believe that the problem is something outside of them. They'll tell me about how the job market is terrible, how relationships keep failing, how the economy is stacked against them, how people don't understand them, or how they just haven't found the right opportunity yet. And sure, all of that may be true. The world is not a fair place. The systems are stacked against certain people. But if we're being brutally honest, sometimes the reason you're stuck is not because of the outside world. It's because you're refusing to grow up. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean it in the sense that there are parts of you that are clinging to something childish, something undeveloped, something unfinished. And as long as you cling to it, life is going to keep you stuck in the same cycle. Growing up is painful. Let's start there. No one really explains that part. Everyone says grow up like it's just this natural thing that happens when you hit a certain age. You turn 18, you graduate, maybe you get a job, maybe you go to college, and people assume you're grown up. But inside, most people are carrying around entire parts of themselves that are frozen in time. Maybe you never grew past the 15-year-old who just wanted to escape, or the 12-year-old who needed validation, or the 8-year-old who was scared and wanted someone else to handle everything. And when life demands that you act like an adult, those frozen parts resist. They want to hide or procrastinate or make excuses. That's not because you're lazy or stupid. It's because those younger parts never actually got the chance to grow up. Think about what it means to grow up. Think about what it means to grow up. It means responsibility. It means facing discomfort instead of running from it. It means doing things not because you want to, but because they need to be done. And that's terrifying if you never had the safety or guidance to learn those skills gradually. Imagine being a kid who never learned how to swim, and then someone just pushes you into the deep end of the pool. You're gonna flail. You're going to panic. You're gonna try to grab onto anything to keep from sinking. That's what a lot of people's adult lives look like. They're in the deep end with no training, no foundation. And so, of course, they cling to anything that feels comfortable. Video games, Netflix, porn, junk food, scrolling on your phone for hours. These aren't just addictions. They're lifeboats for the parts of you that never learned how to swim. The tragedy is that the longer you cling to those lifeboats, the more stuck you become. Because while you're floating there, life is passing you by. Other people are learning, failing, improving, trying again. They're building skills, building relationships, building lives. And you're still clinging to the same distractions, telling yourself you'll start tomorrow or next week or after things settle down. But here's the truth. Things will never settle down. Life is never going to give you the perfect conditions to grow up. At some point, you just have to decide that you're willing to feel the discomfort of putting away childish things and stepping into adult responsibility. Now, let's be clear. Growing up doesn't mean killing the child inside you. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think adulthood means becoming this cold, serious, joyless person who just pays bills and suffers. That's not what I'm talking about. In fact, one of the most beautiful things you can do as an adult is to nurture and protect the childlike parts of yourself, the creativity, the curiosity, the playfulness. But the difference is that those qualities are expressed from a foundation of responsibility. The child within you can play precisely because the adult within you has taken care of the bills, the food, the roof, the boundaries. Growing up doesn't mean silencing the child. It means becoming the parent that your inner child always needed. And here's the thing. Most of us never had perfect models for this. Maybe your parents were absent or they were struggling themselves or they were too harsh or too lenient. Maybe they didn't teach you how to deal with emotions or how to manage money or how to take care of your body. So now here you are, 20, 30, 40 years old, and you're still waiting for someone to show up and teach you, but no one's coming. That's the bitter pill. No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to do the hard parts for you. Growing up means realizing that the rescuer you've been waiting for is actually you. Of course, when I say this, people get defensive. They'll say, "You don't understand. My situation is different. I really can't because of my depression or my trauma or my ADHD or my family." And listen, I do understand. I've worked with people in all kinds of circumstances, and I know how heavy those struggles are. I'm not minimizing them. But here's what I've seen. Even with trauma, even with mental illness, even with the worst family situations, people still have the capacity to grow up. It doesn't mean they grow in the same way or at the same pace as others. But it does mean that the excuse of I can't is usually protecting something deeper. The fear of letting go of comfort, the fear of responsibility, the fear of becoming someone new. Because here's a strange truth. Sometimes being stuck is safer than growing. Stuck might suck, but at least it's familiar. Growth is terrifying because it's unknown. Think about procrastination. Why do you procrastinate? It's not because you're lazy. It's because the task in front of you makes you feel something you don't want to feel: fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough. So instead of facing that feeling, you delay. That's refusing to grow up. Growing up would mean feeling the fear and doing the task anyway. And that's the same pattern across life. The moment responsibility triggers fear or discomfort, you find ways to avoid it. And as long as you keep avoiding, you stay stuck. But here's the hopeful part. Once you see the pattern, you can break it. You can actually begin to grow up, even if it feels impossible. And it doesn't start with massive life overhauls. It starts with very small acts of responsibility. Wash the dishes even if you don't want to. Pay one bill on time. Get up when your alarm goes off. These are not trivial, they're training reps. They're teaching your nervous system that you can do things even when you don't feel like it. And once you build that muscle, it carries over into bigger areas. That's how you grow up. Not all at once, but brick by brick, responsibility by responsibility. By responsibility. And something magical happens when you do. You start to feel a sense of self-respect, because deep down, the reason you feel stuck and ashamed is not just because life is hard, but because you know you've been avoiding. You know you've been dodging responsibility. You know you've been clinging to comfort instead of facing growth. And that knowledge eats away at your self-esteem. But the moment you start taking responsibility, even in small ways, that shame begins to heal. You begin to look at yourself differently. You start to say, maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm capable after all. And that self-respect fuels more growth, which fuels more responsibility, and the cycle reverses. So if you're stuck right now, I want you to ask yourself a brutal question. What part of me is refusing to grow up? Is it the part of me that expects someone else to fix my problems? Is it the part of me that wants life to be easy? Is it the part of me that hides from failure by not trying? Identify that part, name it, and then make a decision. Am I willing to start growing up, one step at a time? Because if you are, I promise you, life will begin to shift. Not overnight, not without setbacks, but slowly, steadily, and surely. One of the hardest things to admit is that on some level, you're complicit in your own stuckness. That's not to say it's all your fault. Life, circumstances, trauma, bad luck, toxic environments, they all play their role. But if you look closely, there's always this layer where you're cooperating with the very thing that's keeping you down. Maybe it's the way you avoid responsibility. Maybe it's how you chase short-term comfort instead of long-term stability. Maybe it's the way you let fear dictate your decisions. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human. Humans resist pain, and growth always involves pain. But as long as you keep resisting, you stay in the same loop, wondering why nothing changes. Let's be brutally honest. A lot of people who are stuck don't actually want to grow up. They say they do. They complain about being stuck. They fantasize about a better life. But when push comes to shove, they won't let go of the childish patterns that give them comfort. They don't want to wake up early. They don't want to take responsibility for their health. They don't want to stop blaming their parents or their ex or society, even when those things are true, because blame feels safer than action. And that's the part of you that's keeping you trapped. Growth doesn't happen until you're willing to face that part and say, enough. The truth is, growing up doesn't happen in one moment. It's not like you flip a switch and suddenly you're mature and disciplined and responsible. It's more like shedding skin. You shed old layers of immaturity piece by piece. One day, you stop expecting people to rescue you. Another day, you stop indulging in excuses. Another day, you decide to take accountability for your financial mess or your procrastination or your bad habits. And with each layer you shed, you feel lighter, freer, strong. But you can't shed those layers if you're still clinging to them because they feel safe. That's why a lot of people stay stuck for years. Because deep down, they're more committed to comfort than to growth. And I get it. Comfort is seductive. When you're lying in bed scrolling on your phone, you don't feel the weight of responsibility crushing you. When you're playing games for 10 hours straight, you don't have to think about the job applications you haven't sent, or the dishes piling up, or the health problems you're ignoring. Comfort numbs you, and when life already feels painful, numbing feels like survival. But survival and growth are not the same thing. Survival keeps you alive. Growth makes life worth living. And if you've been surviving for too long without growing, eventually survival itself becomes suffering. You're alive, but you're not living. You're existing, but you're not moving forward. And that's what it means to be stuck. Now, here's the really painful part. If you refuse to grow up, life will force you to. You might think you're avoiding responsibility, but in reality, responsibility piles up whether you face it or not. The bills don't stop just because you ignore them. The body doesn't stay healthy just because you procrastinate going to the doctor. The relationships don't heal just because you avoid difficult conversations. Everything you avoid compounds in the background, and eventually it collapses on you. And when it does, you'll have no choice but to face it. The problem is, by then it's 10 times heavier than it would have been if you had faced it earlier. Growing up on your own terms is painful, yes, but being forced to grow up by life is brutal. Let's talk about one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. I'll be ready tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll start eating better. Tomorrow I'll get serious about my career. Tomorrow I'll stop wasting time. Tomorrow I'll clean my room. Tomorrow I'll take responsibility. The problem is that tomorrow never comes because you haven't trained yourself to act in the present. You just existed, and ideally you were loved. But in adult relationships, love is not unconditional. It requires effort, compromise, responsibility. If you keep showing up immaturely, expecting your partner to fix your emotions, expecting your friends to tolerate your flakiness, expecting everyone to understand your struggles without you doing the work, you'll end up alone. Growing up in relationships means realizing that love is not enough. Respect, responsibility, effort, those are what sustain connections. And I want to say this clearly. No one grows up perfectly. You will fail. You will regress. You will fall back into childish patterns. That's not the end of the world. Growing up doesn't mean never slipping. It means noticing when you slip, taking accountability, and getting back on track. The difference between someone who stays stuck and someone who grows up is not perfection. It's persistence. The grown-up doesn't wait for motivation. They don't wait for rescue. They don't wait for conditions to be ideal. They show up again and again, even when it's messy. The saddest thing I see is when people waste decades refusing to grow up. They stay in the same patterns until they're 40, 50, 60, and then they look back and wonder where their life went. Don't let that be you. You don't have to have it all figured out right now, but you do have to start. Start with one responsibility you've been avoiding. Start with one step out of your comfort zone. Start with one moment of honesty with yourself. That's how you break free from being stuck. Because the truth is, you're not stuck because the world is unfair, even though it is. You're not stuck because you're broken, even though you've been hurt. You're stuck because there's a part of you that refuses to grow up. And the moment you face that part, the moment you decide you're willing to let it go, that's the moment everything begins to change.